Temptation is often portrayed as a battle between good and evil, a moral tug-of-war. But in the Buddhist perspective, temptation isn't an enemy to defeat, it's a teacher. What we call temptation is simply the arising of a desire, often intense, that promises satisfaction but usually leaves us unsatisfied. It's not the desire itself that is the problem, but the way we relate to it. Buddhism teaches that temptation arises from our attachments, our clinging to sensations, emotions, or identities. When we see something attractive, whether it's food, praise, or even distraction, the mind says, "This will complete me." But that's a lie the ego tells to stay in control. Rather than pushing temptation away or indulging it blindly, the Buddhist path invites us to turn inward and examine it. What am I feeling? What am I running from? What do I hope this will give me? This investigation doesn't need to be dramatic. Just noticing, without judgment, can loosen the grip. In this light, temptation becomes a mirror, one that reflects not our failures, but our inner landscape. It shows where we still hold on, where we fear loss, and where our understanding is still cloudy. When we see temptation not as a flaw but as a signal, we can begin to meet it with wisdom instead of war. At the root of every temptation lies craving, tanha, as the Buddha called it. Craving is not just wanting something. It's the deep, often unconscious urge to grasp, to possess, to escape discomfort, or to solidify a sense of self. This craving arises from ignorance, specifically, ignorance of the true nature of reality. We think that pleasure will last forever, that comfort will resolve our suffering, or that indulging in a desire will finally bring peace. But these are illusions. When we feel temptation, we're usually not responding to the object itself, but to the emotional promise it carries. The sugary food isn't just sugar, it's comfort after a hard day. The angry outburst isn't just anger, it's a cry to feel heard or powerful. In Buddhism, this is called mistaking the rope for a snake. We see threat or salvation where there is only neutral experience shaped by our projections. Understanding this is powerful. It helps us see that temptation is not external. It's a dance of our inner world trying to find balance. And more importantly, it reveals that the object of craving can never deliver what the heart truly longs for. The path to liberation doesn't lie in fulfilling every desire, but in examining what's underneath them. By gently uncovering the craving behind the temptation, we open the door to clarity and freedom. Mindfulness is the first shield against temptation, not by fighting it, but by seeing it clearly. In the heat of desire, the mind tends to shrink. Everything narrows down to a single focus: I want this. The world fades, time compresses, and reasoning dissolves. But when mindfulness is present, we can step back and observe the process without being swept away. The Buddha taught that mindfulness means remembering to pay attention, not just to what's happening outside, but to what's happening inside. When temptation arises, mindfulness doesn't say, "This is bad." It simply says, "Here is craving." That naming, that gentle recognition, already begins to loosen its grip. Instead of reacting impulsively, we create space around the urge. We become witnesses rather than participants. This witnessing changes everything. Imagine watching a fire from a safe distance instead of standing inside the flames. With mindfulness, we notice the first flicker of desire before it roars into action. We notice the body's tension, the mind's justifications, and the emotional pull. And in that noticing, we gain freedom. Temptation thrives on unconsciousness. It grows in the dark, in automatic habit. But once we shine the light of awareness on it, something shifts. The urgency softens. We realize we don't have to follow every urge. We can pause. We can breathe. We can choose. And that, in itself, is liberation beginning. Between the arising of desire and the act of indulgence lies a powerful, often overlooked moment, the pause. In that pause lives our freedom. The Buddha called this the gap between feeling and reaction, the place where we can choose our path rather than be dragged by it. Most of the time, temptation moves fast. A thought appears, a feeling sparks, and before we know it, we're reaching, speaking, doing. But with practice, we can slow down the process and expand the pause. This doesn't require force. It requires attention. When we feel the pull of temptation, we can ask, what's happening right now? Where do I feel this in my body? What is this desire really asking for? These questions don't solve the temptation. They hold it gently, without judgment. And in that holding, we find clarity. The pause is not a void, it's a doorway. It opens us to alternative responses, turning to breath instead of distraction, choosing silence instead of reaction, resting in awareness instead of grasping for comfort. Each time we pause, we retrain the mind. We teach it that it's not a slave to every passing urge. In Buddhist practice, this sacred pause is a training ground. It's where insight begins. Not through suppression, but through seeing. Not through resistance, but through patience. It's here we remember, we are not our impulses. We are the awareness that sees them arise and pass away. One of the most liberating teachings in Buddhism is that everything is impermanent, including temptation. Desires may feel overwhelming in the moment, but they are not permanent fixtures of our mind. They arise, peak, and pass, like waves on the ocean. Recognizing this truth gives us immense power over temptation, because we no longer believe that the urge will last forever. When temptation arises, it often whispers urgency, "You must have this now." It tricks us into thinking that relief only comes through action, through indulgence. But the moment we observe the desire without acting on it, we begin to see its transient nature. We might feel its heat, its tension, even its seductive voice, but if we stay present, we also witness its fading. This simple awareness dissolves much of the illusion. The Buddha encouraged his disciples to contemplate the impermanence of all things, especially feelings and desires. Why? Because we suffer most when we cling to what is fleeting. Temptation draws strength from our belief that it holds lasting satisfaction. But by seeing its impermanence, we stop feeding it. This doesn't mean we deny our desires. It means we meet them with open eyes. We allow them to come and go, like clouds drifting across the sky. In that letting go, something deeper emerges, a calm, a spaciousness, a clarity untouched by the rise and fall of craving. This is the heart of freedom, watching the storm pass without being caught in the wind. Temptation often carries a hidden companion, shame. When we feel tempted, especially by desires we consider wrong or unspiritual, we may judge ourselves harshly. But in the Buddhist path, compassion toward the self is not optional, it is essential. The Buddha never taught that having desires was a failure. He taught that clinging to them causes suffering, and that freedom begins with awareness, not self-punishment. When we respond to temptation with self-criticism, we actually strengthen it. Shame fuels the very craving we're trying to escape. We feel bad, so we reach for comfort. We indulge, then regret, and the cycle continues. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize karu, compassion. Not just toward others, but toward the tender places within ourselves. To meet temptation skillfully, we must first meet ourselves kindly. We can say, "Ah, here is desire, and here is my pain. Let me hold both with care." This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's turning toward our experience instead of running from it or attacking it. When we do this, the heart softens. We stop fighting ourselves. We become allies of our own awakening. Compassion gives us the courage to look deeper. What is this desire trying to soothe? What is it asking me to feel? When we approach temptation not as a threat, but as a message from within, we no longer need to conquer it. We need only to listen, understand, and respond with gentleness. And in that gentle space, transformation naturally unfolds. Temptation loses its power when replaced by wise intention, the conscious choice to act with clarity, kindness, and insight. Buddhism teaches that every action arises from intention, and it is this intention that shapes the path of our lives. When craving pulls us toward momentary pleasure, wise intention invites us to step back and consider what truly nourishes our well-being and peace. Cultivating wise intention is not about rigid self-denial or repression. Instead, it is about aligning ourselves with deeper values, compassion, patience, and understanding. For example, when tempted to react with anger, we might set the intention to respond calmly. When craving unhealthy habits, we might intend to care for our body and mind with kindness. These intentions act like guiding stars in the fog of desire. The practice of setting wise intention often begins in quiet moments of reflection or meditation. We ask ourselves, what kind of person do I want to be? What choices lead to freedom instead of bondage? Repeating these intentions strengthens our resolve and rewires habitual patterns. With intention as an anchor, temptation becomes less a threat and more a reminder. A reminder to pause, reflect, and choose a path that leads to lasting peace instead of fleeting satisfaction. Over time, wise intention transforms our relationship with temptation, no longer something to battle, but an opportunity to grow and awaken. The Buddhist path encourages walking the middle way, a balanced approach that avoids extremes of indulgence and repression. When dealing with temptation, this means neither blindly giving in nor harshly suppressing desires. Instead, it invites us to engage with temptation skillfully, with awareness and balance. Repression often leads to secret suffering, guilt, and eventually stronger urges. On the other hand, indulgence may provide momentary relief but often deepens attachment and dissatisfaction. The middle way teaches us to recognize temptation without becoming enslaved by it or trying to eradicate it through force. This balanced approach includes accepting our human nature, acknowledging that desires will arise, and learning to navigate them with mindfulness and compassion. It's about living in harmony with our impulses rather than in conflict. This harmony frees us from the exhausting cycles of craving and resistance. By walking the middle way, temptation becomes a doorway to wisdom. It shows us where we are out of balance and invites us to return to presence. In this way, temptation is not a stumbling block but a stepping stone, leading us toward greater freedom, peace, and self-understanding. Temptation is a universal human experience, and Buddhism offers a gentle, wise path to navigate it with awareness and kindness. As you practice observing your desires without judgment, remember that temptation is not your enemy but a signal from within, inviting you to understand the cravings that bind you. This understanding opens the door to freedom, revealing the impermanence of urges and the spaciousness beyond them. In moments of temptation, pause and breathe deeply. Let compassion arise for yourself, knowing that struggle is part of the journey. Cultivate wise intentions that guide you back to peace, choosing balance over extremes. Remember, the middle way honors your humanity and your potential to transform. Every urge that comes and goes is an opportunity to practice presence and insight. Over time, with patience and care, the grip of temptation weakens, and a calm clarity takes its place. This clarity is your true nature, unshaken by fleeting desires, radiant in its stillness. Walk this path gently. Allow yourself grace and acceptance, knowing that each moment of mindfulness is a victory. Through this steady practice, temptation no longer controls you. Instead, you learn to move through life with freedom, wisdom, and compassion.